Kenneth, good to see you. Can you remind our viewers what happened to Clayton Boucher?
Clayton Boucher was wrongfully convicted of drug possession on May 31st, 2017 in Lac-La-Biche, Alberta. It's about 200 kilometers north of Edmonton. Those charges were overturned a few months later by the Alberta Court of Appeal, but it did so even though Clayton had pleaded guilty. That's because there was no drugs, ever. And that's something Clayton had always maintained, but the Crown offered him time served if he pleaded guilty, so he took the deal. By that time, he had been in jail for about 4 months. He also just lost his common-law wife in a car collision and was a broken man. But there was something he didn't know, and that was that on the RCMP had tested powder found in his apartment. It suspected was cocaine. Those tests came back on negative March 20th. It was just baking soda. That's 48 days, and that was 48 days before his wife died. Only no one told him, or apparently his lawyer. In fact, the RCMP didn't tell the Crown until several days after she died. The Crown says he misunderstood. The Crown says he misunderstood like his own exhibit list and what was tested. Apparently, he thought there was other powder that wasn't tested. But I've seen all the evidence that doesn't make sense. However, Clayton's lawyer at the time says he was. He supported on the plea deal because he was told by the Crown that tests came back saying there were traces of cocaine found. Either way, there was never any drugs, and Clayton got vindicated later on.
Now, Kenneth, you've discovered some new information here. What can you tell us about that?
Well, what I just explained is something I had previously reported on. APTN was the first to break this story and stay on it. Now I can tell you more of it. I had a cop source call me one day and ask, why didn't Clayton just go for bail when he was arrested on drug charges? Well, there was a reason for that, and it just wrapped up earlier this month. When Clayton was arrested January 22nd, 2017 for drug offenses, he was already on bail for an alleged armed robbery in October 2015. Well, that armed robbery charge was stayed by the Crown just 2 weeks ago. It was alleged that Boucher robbed a department store in Lac-La-Biche for $160. There was no working security camera, so the entire case relied on 2 female clerks working that day. We uncovered their evidence was full of holes. Despite finding a photo of Clayton on Facebook and believing he was a robber, one clerk still couldn't pick Clayton out of a photo lineup with the RCMP. The other clerk picked him out of the lineup, but needed to be asked several questions by the RCMP before she was certain, and she needed to be 100% certain. Also, her memory had just improved. She didn't recall the robber having any facial hair on the day of the robbery, but now 17 days later, at the RCMP detachment, the robber had a thick mustache, just like Boucher did or Clayton had in the just like Clayton had in the Facebook photo they had found online. There's also several other issues that we explained in the story online that I broke just recently this week. But the Crown stayed the armed robbery charge because the RCMP never subpoenaed the 2 witnesses to testify. The Crown had no case the day the trial was supposed to begin.
So, Kenneth, anyone taking responsibility for all this?
Not really responsibility. So what Clayton did was he sued the Mounties, the Crown, and the former lawyer. He sued the Mounties, the Crown, and his former lawyer last spring with the help of a Toronto law firm led by prominent lawyer John Phillips. He's seeking over $1 million, but also answers. He wants to know who knew what and when. We already know the RCMP disciplined one officer, Corporal Dan Fenton, for neglect of duty. He was supposed to be in charge of the drug test. Essentially, they sent the test on this powder off to Health Canada. It gets tested to be a controlled substance, and it comes back as an exhibit. That was Fenton's job. His job was to take the test back and then give them to the lead officer that was investigating. He didn't do that. The RCMP seems to be scratching it off as a big mistake, but Clayton accuses them. But Clayton says, "No, you did it on purpose," and he's saying that they did it because he's Métis and for other reasons. Another interesting part of this is the RCMP denied in court any wrongdoing, but 10 days prior disciplined Fenton. So what gives? Either you did something wrong or you didn't. The RCMP also say, hey, we told the Crown that the powder wasn't drugs like a month before Boucher pleaded guilty, so it's not really our fault, right? But again, that's something that's working through the court. Another thing I found interesting though is that the lawyer from Justice Canada is representing the Crown attorney, which is Erwin Schultz, and the 5 Mounties that are being sued, even though they're at odds. One saying one did the other. It's a case that's still working its way through the court that we'll cover, but we'll have to wait and see how it goes. But before that, I hope to have another story out soon, and that's about the Crown, Erwin Schultz, and about the Crown and what the Alberta Law Society's response was to what he did.
Well, Kenneth, looking forward to those stories and your continued coverage on this. Appreciate you taking some time for us.
Right on. Thanks, Dennis.